Stress with cortisol is the biggest thing with oxytocin, and disrupted sleep. That's hugely disruptive to oxytocin. I would say those are the two biggest things. And on the stress factor, it's either real stress or perceived stress. So, watching the news, it's like take action for good instead of watching the bad. Use your energy for the positive that creates more oxytocin.
Hello, hello. I'm your host for today, Dr. Carrie Jones, and I am so excited to bring on the girlfriend doctor, Dr. Anna Cabeca. She is a triple board certified OBGYN in Dallas, Texas, who has all the information around oxytocin. I have learned a ton from her over the years, and this one hits home because oxytocin is known as our love or bonding hormone, and it gets squashed when you're under a lot of stress, have a lot of cortisol and adrenaline running around. And when it gets squashed, we feel burned out. We feel disconnected. We struggle with our mood. And especially if you're going through perimenopause and menopause and you don't have the progesterone or the estradiol to really help support the production of oxytocin. And if you've got all that stress and all that cortisol, it's going to impact oxytocin. So listen up as you're going to learn, what does oxytocin do? How does our body make it? And most importantly, what can we do to support it from a lifestyle point of view, from supplements, and even can you use oxytocin replacement therapy? So this is the episode for you. If you're feeling burned out, if you're not feeling a lot of love, if you don't have a lot of motivation, and if you're going through perimenopause and menopause, as an aside, I think you're going to learn a lot. She even has an oxytocin quiz you can take on her website, dranna.com. By the time you get through the episode, you're going to be searching for that quiz. So listen up. Dr. Anna Cabeca, welcome to the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I cannot wait to talk about oxytocin today.
Well, I am so happy to be here with you. I've been looking forward to our conversation.
Mostly because oxytocin is that like girlfriend, bonding, love hormone, and you talk about it better than anyone I've ever heard. So I think in our day and age, the society, we need some oxytocin help, don't we?
We do, and very much so.
Well, before we get into that, I do want everyone listening to know your background, your history, your education, and honestly, how you got into oxytocin.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to share it. And I would tell you that it's been my own hell and my own demons and my own trauma that actually got me to where I am right now and to be able to help so many others and realizing the power of oxytocin and also the hierarchy of our hormones. And I'll tell you about that in a bit. But I trained as a gynecologist and obstetrician at Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And I came into solo practice, into private practice right after as a National Health Service Corps scholar. So I was blessed to be one of few recipients to receive a full ride medical school scholarship. And so the payback is to serve in an underserved area, like on Indian reservations or Native American reservations and in rural HIV clinics or in city HIV clinics. And then I created a rural women's health practice in Southeast Georgia, so McIntosh County and Brunswick, Georgia. And I love that. And I quickly realized with the economic strains of many of my clients, shrimpers and some of the poorest areas of our nation. And quick aside, there's so much help that's needed in our nation in the health and health access for individuals, like sending it to in arms abroad is not my thing. This is where I am, National Health Service Corps scholar, practicing in Southeast Georgia. And I realized my doctor's bag was empty. It was really insufficient to deal with many of the things that I was seeing in my patients. And especially when it came to sexual health and menopause area. And then in my own experience, through my own trauma, personal trauma, where in 2006, we lost our son in a tragic accident, Carrie, and it was devastating for all of us. And yet my husband and I desperately wanted to have another child. And so went through post-traumatically, round after round, 6 rounds of the highest doses of injectable fertility meds. I'm an OBGYN. I will push that limit. And I had no ovarian response. And then shortly thereafter, diagnosed with early menopause and was told the only chance for pregnancy again would be egg donation, which wasn't a choice that we wanted to make at that point. And so that was grief upon grief. So trauma, stress, grief, loss, all of those things colliding. And I took a sabbatical from my medical practice for a year, and a amazing doctor, Dr. Deborah Shepherd, took over my practice. I consider her an angel. And I traveled around the world. And through those travels, I learned about herbal medicine like maca in Peru and how they use that for infertility, and in different places, different foods, turmeric and grapeseed extract and cat's claw herb. I mean, so many different things I started accumulating into my regimen to support my body. And before I knew it, I was menstruating again. And naturally conceived at age 41, my daughter, the child I was told I would never be able to have. So very, very happy ending. And then when as I came back into practice in my Southeast Georgia clinic, I was so empowered. I was like, look, you have the power within your body. Very rarely is it on a prescription pad or based on a surgical knife. You have the power within your body to heal itself. And I started digging deeper into root cause medicine, into functional medicine, and really applying what I learned from world medicine, East meets West medicine, and my own life journey and trauma. And what happened though, the PTSD was still in my system. The post traumatic stress disorder was still in from the accident was still in my system, although I covered it up really well, working 80 hours a week, right? Managing my family, trying to keep my marriage together at that point. And things started to fall apart. That chronic push of cortisol opposed oxytocin, the hormone of love and connection. Because when cortisol's high, oxytocin's low. And when oxytocin's high, cortisol's low. And when cortisol is high for too long, it gets suppressed by our paraventricular nucleus of our nervous system. And so we get in this dangerous state where cortisol and oxytocin are low, and that's burnout. That's the physiology of divorce. That's the physiology of breakdown, depression, maybe even suicide. So, in isolation, withdrawal, and I say the devil acts to get you isolated so he can attack, right? So, that's just a hardship comes that way. And so I learned through that how powerful, even after spending hundreds of $1,000s on my medical education and studying all our reproductive hormones, how much even more powerful oxytocin is as a hormone. And again, we are empowered. Our body's able to produce a full pharmacy of oxytocin.
Which is what I love, and you talk about a lot, and we'll get into that. It's that, the practical, tactical, and can I do this myself? This sounds like me. Can I raise my oxytocin again? And time after time, and hearing you lecture and reading your blogs and what have you, it's yes, yes, you can. The first step though is identifying it. So let's go there. You've touched on it, of course, but if somebody's listening to this, what does oxytocin do? And then how do we know when it's low?
Yeah, that's a great question. I like to say first, like to clarify, oxytocin, not oxycodone, because sometimes they can get that confused. They both feel good, but not the same way. Okay. So, oxytocin is the hormone of love and connection, and our body produces it when we're in labor, when we orgasm, when we're laughing, when we're having fun. Our body produces it naturally in these ways. And many clients' first experience with exogenous oxytocin is with Pitocin in labor and delivery. As an OB, we'll give you Pitocin. That's oxytocin. We're giving you oxytocin. It's a bioidentical. Pitocin is oxytocin. And we give that to stimulate the uterine contractions and speed up your labor. And then we have oxytocin receptors, so we have them in the uterus, but we have them in the heart. So hence love and heart and lots of oxytocin receptors, plus the heart's ability to produce oxytocin. So different places throughout our body, we're able to make and receive oxytocin. So that's the most comprehensive hormone that we have in our body.
How would somebody recognize that they probably have an oxytocin issue?
So when oxytocin is low, you feel disconnected. Like, say, for example, you go into the grocery store, you see a friend from 30 years, and you're like, I hope she doesn't see me. I don't want, and there's no animosity there. Just like, I want to be invisible. I'm isolating. Anhedonia, lack of enjoyment, lack of pleasure. Also, we see in, like, for example, autistic children are very low in oxytocin. And so we see pale skin, inability to flush. We can feel cold, clammy hands. And I've been doing this for a long time now, so I can see it on an exam and also very easily in asking questions. But those are some of the most common, and depression again, but mostly that feeling of disconnect. I will hear clients say, I love my wife, but I don't feel love for her. Or I love my husband, I don't feel love for him. I used to love doing this activity. I don't even want to do it anymore.
When you are with a client or patient, what is your repertoire of questions that you might ask them to dial that in?
I have an oxytocin quiz on my website. So, quick and dirty oxytocin quiz. It's a short, simpler one from Dr. Terry Hertog's oxytocin quiz and questionnaire that he published several years back. And so I use that just kind of as a break, or I'll ask many of those questions. And the other thing is the handshake, feeling on the handshake too. And feeling that cold, clammy is usually like a red flag for something going on there, among other things. But that's usually one. And I'll give you an example. I was working with oxytocin in a patient. And so when you feel like someone's low in oxytocin, there's very few ways that we can do a fresh frozen plasma blood test. We can do a blood test and it has to be flashed out, frozen to one of two labs in the country that I know of that are doing it. Meridian Valley lab is doing a urine oxytocin test, but it's volatile. It's not specific with the testing. So between the questionnaire, the symptoms, and if you do testing, but also sometimes I'll give a injection of oxytocin or a lozenge of oxytocin in the office and see how they react to it. See, and I had this client I was working with oxytocin for sexual health. So we were doing some oxytocin tablets for libido and intimacy aspects and helping with some sexual issues. And she's like, she just felt so much better. Like her mood lifted. She was happier in general and was doing really well. And then again, it's just a crutch to get you freely producing that again. So using it as a crutch. And then she said, my son, she had a 21-year-old son, and he may likely been on the spectrum, but he said he finished high school and he's not really ambitious looking for work. He's not making friends. And I don't know. She said, so I gave him one of your oxytocins and he just seemed happier. He just seemed more lovely. So she brought him in. I was like, well, don't do that again. Bring him in to me. And I evaluated him and I gave him an injection of oxytocin. He was beautiful. Like he's like 6'2", 240 pounds, ex high school football player. And of course, thinking traumatic brain injury too. Ex high school football player, pale skin, and not looking at me in the eye for the entire conversation, and cold, clammy handshake. And I was like, okay, let me give you a injection here, you mister not looking in my eyes. And his skin pinked right up, like when you get an orgasm and you have that red flush on your chest. So his skin pinked up here, his ears pinked up, cheeks blushed like red, and he started smiling and he made eye contact with me right away. He's like, oh, I think I feel something. He's just smiling. And it's like, okay, yeah, it just shows oxytocin deficiency, whether it's from high cortisol, whether the traumatic brain injury had something to do with it, or whether being part of the spectrum was the issue. And so that was one way that we helped him through a rough patch. And within the year, he'd had a full-time job, started part-time college, and had a new lease on life. And, so that was one intervention that we had done. And it's just beautiful to see.
I've heard you talk about women going into menopause and the decline in like estradiol and oxytocin. And a lot of women feel that what you just described. Maybe they were really outgoing and loving and motivated and excited in their 20s and 30s, and somewhere in their 40s, maybe early 50s, they're like, eh.
Oh my gosh, so true. Can I tell you how you can tell them right away? If they're shaming people on Instagram, if they're hating on other people and they're not lifting you up, if they're putting you down, there's no reason we need to there's always something positive I can find in anyone, right? And that's a practice and a skill that I work on, but it's like I can learn from everyone. And so anyway, so I think that's a sign of low oxytocin.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think a lot of women have said that in maybe not that exact sentence, but they'll say to me, I just feel less patient, more rude. I find myself saying things I would normally have said. And on the one hand, in perimenopause, I appreciate women finding their boundary, women finding their authentic self. But on the other hand, when they even recognize I'm not as connected as I used to be. I don't want to be around people. I'm becoming really rude and judgmental. To me, immediately, I think of oxytocin. And I'm like, ooh, your decline in estradiol is negatively impacting your oxytocin.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that because I came across this like understanding the hormonal pathways, I mean, ingrained in me from residency as a gynecologist and obstetrician. So from progesterone, pregnenolone, down to DHEA, down to cortisol, I mean, wherever we're going with our pathways, right? So we stop there. I've been doing this for 30 years now. So it's like a long time, but I've been noting over the last few years too, just more of the research coming out. I'm always looking at oxytocin research. But with that said, I was in a Joe Dispenza advanced follow up retreat, and he was talking about these peptides, meditating on these peptides. He showed scientifically to increase the availability of that peptide in our body, and he verified it with blood tests. So meditating on Serpin A5, and then he said, "Well, meditate on these others." He called them molecules of the mystical, one of which oxytocin. So, meditating on oxytocin, he talked about the conversion of tryptophan, right, to 5-HTP, to serotonin, to melatonin. That's the pathway we make. And I was thinking, wait a second, we need progesterone. Progesterone is one of the first hormones that declines as we age, and progesterone helps maintain tryptophan's circulating levels in our body. So, progesterone helps with sleep, certainly through GABA receptors, but also with maintaining tryptophan to further make 5-HTP, to make serotonin, to make melatonin to help us sleep. And estrogen, we know we need estrogen on board to sustain and help serotonin do its job in our body, the anti anxiety hormone, peace and consistency, right? And we'll then from there to melatonin. So, in this perimenopause stage, one of the biggest complaints is sleep disorders as well as menopause because progesterone not helping tryptophan when it's too low, estrogen not helping serotonin when it's too low. So you're not making enough melatonin and you make oxytocin from melatonin. So less sleep, less connection, more disconnected, more irritable, more rude.
And now we got to increase that. We do all the things, but especially that oxytocin. When it comes to hormone hierarchy, which you mentioned earlier, how do you categorize them?
Yeah, I like to categorize like all our hormones, say at a university. Like every student in a university has their own mission, their own purpose, their own role, their own job, etc., right? And gifts. So like our body is full of hundreds of hormones. So including our reproductive hormones are like students in a university. And now your professors of the university, those are the regulators of the students in the university. And so in the hierarchy, that's insulin and cortisol and adrenaline. So we know very well, like say, for example, cortisol professor was drinking and high the night before, comes in to class in the morning. He's like, we're just watching a movie, turns out the lights, falls asleep in the back of the room. There's disorder and disorganization among the classroom, right? And so when you have a good professor, you're on task, you're alert, you're interested, you're engaged, you're cooperating. And that's when we need cortisol in balance, insulin in balance, and really check on adrenaline. And then the dean of the university, the president of the university, that is our oxytocin. Like think of that as the overarching, the king or queen hormone, the presidential hormone, and that is the hormone of love and connection. And when it's malaise and anger and fire and brimstone, there's not peace in the student body. But when it's calm, logical, kind, giving, we are all connected. We're here to support each other. We're working together towards a common higher purpose. That's the hormone of oxytocin. That's that hierarchy.
I love that. Now, you mentioned in the beginning, of course, cortisol and oxytocin, like a seesaw, right? They can, if your cortisol's high, oxytocin's low. We've talked about estrogen and progesterone. Are there other things that we humans do to mess up our oxytocin?
Well, stress with cortisol is the biggest thing with oxytocin and disrupted sleep. That's hugely disruptive to oxytocin. I would say those are the two biggest things. And on the stress factor, it's either real stress or perceived stress. So, watching the news, it's like take action for good instead of watching the bad. Use your energy for the positive that creates more oxytocin versus being brainwashed on news propaganda.
or even scared. I find that a lot of people listen to or watch, even I noticed with like Netflix, they'll watch crime mystery, murder mystery, or they're really into murder mystery podcasts. And then they're all hyped up and they can't sleep. And their nervous system doesn't know the difference. They're hearing this tale of crime. And the nervous system is going, what in the heck? Subconsciously, it's very scary. And I've had more people say to me, since stopping doing that, I've noticed my cortisol has gotten where it should be. It's down where it should be. I feel less stressed out. I feel less adrenaline, not putting two and two together initially. And of course, then your poor oxytocin is all suppressed.
Yeah, and that is so important. Fear, real or perceived fear, is so disruptive to the physiology and affecting the pineal gland in our brain, which is responsible to make melatonin. And for orgasm or for oxytocin to be increased, you have to feel safe. Like a woman has to feel safe. And when we're meditating in a group, there's safety in that group. There should be safety in that group. If you're not feeling safe, you're like, oh, these are crackpots in here. I'm not feeling safe. You're not going to be able to get into highest state of meditation. You're not going to be able to improve your oxytocin secretion.
All right, so let's actually go right into that. As everyone's listening, there are a lot of ways to reduce stress. There are a lot of supplements, nutrients, herbs that are on the cortisol side, but we don't talk a lot about how do we increase oxytocin, which is probably equally, if not way more important, considering it's the dean of our university. So how do we raise oxytocin?
Yeah. And in my book, The Hormone Fix, I talk about some foods that are beneficial. And it comes to number one, we got to decrease inflammation, decrease cortisol. Everything that we do to decrease cortisol is going to help you produce more oxytocin. That is given. And supplement wise, vitamin C, it's so simple, but it's such a simple supplement that has such an important role. The other supplement is vitamin D. None of our hormones, and especially not oxytocin, is not going to work well in that low vitamin D. And we know mood disorders, depression is associated with low vitamin D. It's contributing to low oxytocin, but in a bigger standpoint, vitamin D is needed at the progesterone receptor. So here at the top, for progesterone to work well, for our cycles to be normal, we've got to have optimal vitamin D levels to make progesterone work and then help us down that cascade of tryptophan, 5-HTP, serotonin, melatonin, and then oxytocin. So thinking of those things, I think that's really powerful. So those are two things. But the biggest thing is making it naturally, playing with a pet, having that time with a pet. I mean, they are so full of oxytocin. My dog, Sandy, she's a farm rescue Australian Shepherd. She's just like, oh, so full of oxytocin. And so it always helps me at the door of my house. That is my oxytocin reset. So playing with pet, orgasm, sexual health and intimacy. And when you're low oxytocin, you become roommates. Oxytocin keeps you together. Doing things that increase oxytocin together, doing things you love, adventures you love, enjoying nature, enjoying some like thrilling aspects of nature, going for long hikes, doing surfing, going out and doing fun stuff, exhilarating, and you're having fun. It really compounds that improvement, that boost of oxytocin. Going to a wedding increases your oxytocin.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Now, what about taking oxytocin? You've mentioned injections that you have in your office as an example, or people who take it at home. What does that look like when you're thinking, hey, we're at the point where I need to give you a little to get you going before you can really make it on your own?
Yeah, so by prescription only, oxytocin by prescription only. It's because it's a very fragile molecule. And so at this time, when I'm prescribing oxytocin, I will just do a test with oxytocin injection in the office. But that's, it burns. You don't want to take it. If you're going to test someone with it, put some lidocaine in there. But there are several ways to use it. You can use it as a nasal spray and as a sublingual, as a troche or a rapid dissolve tablet. So because oxytocin is so fragile, like the heat-based ways to use it in different types of formulas, it can break down oxytocin. So you need to know that your compounding pharmacist is not using any significant heat, and rapid dissolve tablets seem to give you the quickest bioavailability right away, as well as the nasal spray. And I also use it vaginally. So for orgasm and sexual health and lubrication and intimacy when needed.
That's interesting. And the heat one is interesting. I don't think I realized that because I just want to clarify there's no conventional oxytocin, correct? You're not going to find this at Walgreens or Costco pharmacy or something like that. It would have to be compounded.
Right.
Okay. And then for the people who are living in really hot states, is it shipped on ice when it gets prescribed?
Well, when the tablets, yeah, typically the rapid dissolve tablets are pretty temperature stable, but the nasal spray usually comes in on ice.
And then are they kept in the fridge?
Yes, and then you can keep it in the fridge, but it's shelf stable. Usually, check with your pharmacist that's making it, but 60 to 90 days on the shelf.
Okay. And dosing, just as a general, again, everybody go talk to your own practitioner or your compounding pharmacist. But I would be curious on what an average dosing is for somebody or a range.
Right. It really does range. Like with the nasal spray can start at 5 international units and go up to 25 international units. Rarely do I need to go above that. With troches, I usually start at 20 international units and do one. For example, my burnout ER physician I was treating. So burnout, trying to work on everything, feeling overwhelmed, low oxytocin on all assessments. And I just said, okay, when you leave the hospital on your way home, take this oxytocin, listen to fun music in the car that you enjoy, no news, listen to fun music in the car. I mean, so the combination. And she'd go home and she had a better relationship. She said, I felt like a mom coming home again. And so that just builds up that habit. You don't have the tension. I'm worried from work. I'm late getting home. I don't have dinner ready. It's like, just let that go. Just be who you are, where you are, focus on that present moment. Things like deep breathing, vagus nerve, like in stimulating the vagus nerve, increases your oxytocin naturally as well. So it's another really powerful thing. And again, I always start like top down. So I'm going to start with progesterone, make sure I've optimized their vitamin D level, vitamin C. What else do I need to address? And get that the practices that we do that are our ability to do, like the thought, changing your thought to a thought of gratitude, microdosing gratitude throughout the day is microdosing oxytocin throughout the day. And so doing these things really is more powerful than anything we can take. But sometimes we do need it for a crutch. Sometimes I'll go up to 50 IUs, carry prescribing for like pre-intercourse, pre-intimacy for enhanced orgasm. But mostly I use it more often. I use it more often now for PTSD, trauma, and just kind of let's just get this crutch, get you back into the habit of what that feels good. You've got to do these things in order for me to prescribe it for you. So it's a powerful hormone.
When you have somebody that's at the total burnout state and you're using all the lifestyle nutrition factors coupled with oxytocin, what is the average, do you think, turnaround time where somebody goes, oh, hallelujah?
Yeah, just weeks.
Weeks. Okay. That's amazing. So this is why I have you on. More people need to know about this. This is really important.
I am working on an over the counter, like a homeopathic combination. I don't have that fully to my satisfaction yet. So I'll let you know. You'll be the first to get a bottle when it comes out.
Heck yeah, please do.
Other things that like we can use essential oils, smells that we enjoy right through our olfactory tract that we enjoy can help increase oxytocin. So I love bergamot, and bergamot has so many other benefits. It's ease, happy. It's a happy essential oil, bergamot, Earl Grey tea, but bergamot is a happy essential oil. Well, I used to really love Earl Grey tea. This is an aside. Did you know Earl Grey tea came about because the tea was rotten and then they put bergamot in the tea to mask the rotten tea leaves? So disappointed. I'm like, okay, I'm having my bergamot and drinking my non-rotted. Now it's not rotted, but it's just that's how Earl Grey came about.
I had no idea.
An English friend of mine told me that. So I was like, I had no idea. It's like, I will never drink Earl Grey tea. I was like, oh, good to know. Good to know the origin story. It's always interesting. But anyway, bergamot as itself is a happy essential oil. And then different essential oils that you can put together. Margaret Christensen likes to put bergamot and lavender essential oils together, rub it in her hands and smell it. And so it's a nice trick, a nice boost. So those are other ways that we can also boost our oxytocin. Just exercise, it's a muscle. Increasing oxytocin, making that a priority. I mean, there was a point where I was every day wanting to kill myself. I know what that feels like. So it is a practice and a discipline, and it's within our power to do that. I don't use oxytocin anymore. Very rarely. I'll use some, very stressful, certainly over the last couple months, some huge stresses. So it was back into finding that I was cycling down, doing everything I can to make sure that I increase my oxytocin naturally as a priority. Yeah.
When you use oxytocin vaginally, is this something you would need to let dissolve prior to any sexual action taking place? Or is it okay if the other partner gets a little oxytocin on them?
Yeah, it's perfectly fine. Just pulsatile, perfectly fine and safe. And that's a good question because we diverge again to talking about estrogen, vaginal estrogen, very safe. But if you have a male partner, estrogen is not safe for the male partner. And I can't tell you how many exams I've done where they use their vaginal estrogen formula 2 days before they came in to see me, and there's still cream in there. It's supposed to dissolve and absorb in within 4 hours, but I don't know, I would still see estrogen cream in there, and that's not good for the male partner. Oxytocin is perfectly fine. DHEA, like in my Julva, perfectly fine for the male partner. So it's a great question.
Especially because for those listening, she does have a vaginal DHEA cream, the Julva, which is quite wonderful. And so I would always educate my patients when we would do vaginal estrogen of, hey, just as a reminder, your partner, whoever that is, probably doesn't need extra estrogen. Be very mindful. But like you, I would still see it in there when I would do gyne exams of like, how long ago did you use this?
Yeah, it's supposed to be, but according I pulled up some scientific studies, have been known to be there 18 hours later.
Oh, goodness. Well, Dr. Anna, this has been amazing. I so appreciate being able to share everything in your brilliant mind about oxytocin. And I think everybody listening is like, that's me. And I need to support my oxytocin more. I know I do every time I think of you or hear you lecture or read your stuff. I think, oh, I've got to get better at the oxytocin. So, where can everyone find you? Tell us all the things.
So you can find me at dranna.com, dranna.com. That's my website. You can check out my oxytocin quiz there, but I'll give you links for it, Carrie. And I have a store, my products and programs and educations, all at dranna.com. And then on social media at The Girlfriend Doctor. So please follow me there. Let me know you heard me here on Carrie's show, and I'll give you some extra love. Thanks, Carrie, for having me.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And you are absolutely the girlfriend doctor. So, I appreciate all your knowledge. And everyone listening, please go follow her on Instagram at The Girlfriend Doctor or go to her website. You know you want to take that quiz, dranna.com. So thank you again.
Welcome to Rupa Health, the best place to order, manage, and track results from over 30 different lab companies in one single place for free. It's going to take you under 2 minutes to sign up, and you can order any functional medicine lab for your client in under 30 seconds. Let me show you how it's done. So here's our beautiful interface. I'm typing in the name of my client, selecting the lab that I want to order for them, and hitting send. From there, Rupa and their amazing team handle the rest. They email the client, collect payment, and even offer an interest-free 3-month payment plan. We've also built the world's largest library of information about chronic health conditions, the lab tests that can help you find the root cause, and the evidence-based interventions that you can use to help people heal from them. It's called the Rupa Health Magazine. There, we have in-depth articles about almost any health condition you can imagine. And we give you step-by-step protocols that other clinicians have used to help their clients heal and that are verified by evidence-based sources. You should totally check it out, and it'll transform your practice. And we can't wait to see you. So make sure you sign up today at rupahealth.com.